as you know, we're here together as on this interview to really discuss OmniLife and everything you've done to this point in building OmniLife. So welcome to Wonder Fund, and we're excited to be here with you to help fundraise.
Yeah, thank you, Marvin.
Yeah, so with this interview, Dalton, I just wanted to ask you a few questions. And so maybe you could just give us a little background and overview of OmniLife, just a quick and dirty version, and then we'll jump into some of the details here.
Yeah, so the company was really born out of a connected purpose to the tissue and organ transplant industry. I went to school at the University of Iowa, born and raised out of Iowa. So was the co-founder. We both went to school at University of Iowa. I played football at Iowa for a couple years and then got in a motorcycle accident that ended my career. I ended up having a myriad of injuries. It was a life-threatening accident. I had some facial reconstruction, several brain bleeds, hip reconstruction, and then I had a paralyzed right arm because my brachial plexus was torn in a couple spots, and worked for a long time to try to get my arm movement back, but it wasn't coming back. And so we did a nerve transplant we actually got that surgery done out of state, and ended up having, it was about 4 months after the transplant, ended up getting twitches and started learning how to remove my arm. And now I have if you couldn't see the scars, you would have no idea that I ever had anything wrong with my arm. And that was the inception for my, I guess, aha moment that I hadn't really been exposed to the idea and the concept of not just regenerative medicine, but more specifically like reutilizing donated tissue and organs. And I got kind of involved into the tissue space, was doing research in that area. That's when I met Eric. We started working together, and then my uncle, a family member of mine, is a transplant surgeon, and they started talking about some of the challenges on the organ transplant side, which we started learning more about. And through research, we learned that 54% of donated organs weren't being transplanted, and that was a huge, I guess, number that made us very curious to understand why. And we obviously learned that there's a lot that goes into that 54%, and there's certain areas that can't be prevented, but there are a very large number of organs that aren't being transplanted that are preventable waste. And we really wanted to set out to solve how we could eliminate that waste. And I think maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but like our big picture is that one, there's donated organs from deceased donors that we should be utilizing. But there will always be, based on the rates of growth of chronic diseases like diabetes, especially, that are causing other long-term illnesses, and obesity that's really affected heart failure, heart disease, diabetes itself as well. This is a really growing population, and there's a growing need for treatments, of which organ replacement would be ideal for. And being dependent on living donation and being dependent on deceased donation is always going to be one of those games where there's going to be more demand and an increase in demand versus supply. And we even see, as medical advancements, technology advances, that supply is going to get smaller, right? Hopefully there's less deaths, less car accidents, et cetera. And so we have to think big picture about, and that's what OmniLife is thinking, is let's use the organs that we have, but how do we build a foundation, a system, a platform that can grow with the needs of demand, the growing demand. And we really see us and the company, we're born first with an organ-centric mindset, but we've learned from deceased donors. But we've really come to learn that our platform is most powerful when we think about the allo transplant space, with allo transplant being the transplantation of any tissue from one person to another. And in allotransplant, there is tissue, and there also is cell, and the whole biotech industry of engineering organs, growing organs. And although we're not in the business of doing that, we are in the business of making sure that those organs get placed. And we are thinking big picture. We are thinking about a future where our platform not only is helping make sure that deceased donation donors, that we're honoring those gifts and we're placing them, but we also have supply chains coming from researchers and those growing organs and making sure that they're placed, and working with the biotech industry, working with therapeutics industry, working with the genomics industry to really think about a future where, we do tissue banking now. There's a future where there's going to be organ banking. There's going to be a future where we won't need to rely so much on the donated organs. We'll have an abundance of supply. And that's really a future we're building towards. It's maybe a long ways away, and there's a lot of argument about how fast that's coming. I think in the short term, we're really focused on the organs that we have and preventing the waste that's happening today.
That's an incredible journey that you just shared there, going from that accident and that being the genesis of why you founded OmniLife. And so you grew up in Iowa, right? And so when you grew up there, did you ever have an inkling that you were going to be doing something like this in the future? What was that life like?
Yeah, not at all. I think I had enjoyed practicing leadership characteristics through sports, but I was not. I feel like people confuse leadership with like high charisma. I was definitely not a very charismatic person in high school. I feel like I was more shy, more secluded in terms of my leadership style. I really led by action, and on the field. And so I ended up, sports was a huge part of my life, and I kind of practiced those leadership traits through sports. But that's kind of, looking back, like the only kind of connection to, I was building some characteristics through sports that are really helpful today in business. I think the accident really was a wake-up call for me. I mean, growing up, I had a pretty certain path that I wanted to take, which was go play Division I football, go to the NFL. And that was the track I was on. That was the vision I had for myself, and everything was super focused on that.
Wow. And you were an Iowa Hawkeye, right?
Yes. Yeah. 50 pounds ago.
Yeah. I mean, that's as a D1 school. I mean, you were playing at a pretty high level there. And, so tell me, what was that like when you had this accident? It crushed in many ways your dream there. And what was that basement, that dark place like when that happened?
Yeah, I mean, I was depressed for sure, for a while after going through, and I was on, I mean, I had a lot of surgeries, and so I was, that whole experience was very humbling, going from a Division I athlete to, your body doesn't look or work the way it used to. From having to have your, help get, nurses helping me shower, helping me put my clothes on, helping me eat. That was kind of an eye-opening experience that was pretty powerful. I think what got me through was realizing that there was a lot of things that didn't matter that mattered a lot when I was in the hospital. And the thing that mattered the most was my family and my friends. And so I think that's kind of when I realized the power of relationships and just kind of thinking big picture. I feel like it's a little cliche, but when you really feel it and experience it, it's easy to take for granted. And I have to continually remind myself, even to this day, of that, because it's easy to forget when you get caught up in all the other things. But yeah, I think it was a really challenge. The other thing that I learned from that is, I feel like, a lot of yogis and a lot of people that meditate talk about trying to find true self, and all those kind of things, and kind of separating the ego from true self. And for maybe people less familiar with those terms, I think essentially is we kind of build this kind of persona, right? I built this, okay, Dalton Shaull's a football player. Dalton Shaull, because he's a football player, does these things. He eats these things. He dresses this way. He has friends like this. He talks like this. This is what he does in his free time. And it was all building this like construction, which was a necessary fake reality, right? I was a football player. That was what I chose. And so you construct this reality to try to simplify the world and make decisions based on those models to help you get and achieve your goals. So they're necessary, but I guess I realized just how fictitious those personas were, right? Because the minute that football got taken away, I was faced with, okay, wow, like, who am I? what does Dalton do? You know, if everything was around this model of football player and then that's yanked from you, and there's no like still trying to be a football player, right? I mean, it was just like, yep, nope, that's like completely off the table now. Like you can't ever play football again.
Wow.
That was just one of those things where it's like, okay, well, time to go back to the drawing board. And that was, I think, that was a very long, slow, confusing process, but one that allowed me to almost become curious again, like, okay, be open-minded. And that open-minded ultimately led me to like that surrendering to, okay, I thought I had all my stuff figured out. Okay, world, what am I supposed to do? Who am I? And just being open to that, it led me to the company.
Wow. I mean, you talk about that epiphany that you had, just being powerless in many ways. And would you consider yourself, let's say, a spiritual person in that regard?
Yeah, I think I never did beforehand. You know, I mean, I was Christian, right? And grew up with Christian, you know, I guess, teachings and learnings. But you know, there was an experience that I had in a near-death experience that really, for me, allowed me to feel just how interconnected and similar we all are. And from that perspective, I think I'm spiritual, and I would be happy to, you know, if anybody else has had experiences like that, or would like to talk about it, I'd love to dive in deeper. But I think, yeah, I definitely had an experience, an out of body experience that really gave me a taste of and kind of the importance of, okay, what's important. And it gave me a new perspective for sure, that a new filter to see the world that I think is what others would say pretty spiritual.
Yeah. And, you know, you strike me as a pretty, number one, a deep guy and very focused individual ever since this happened in building OmniLife. And, you know, I also understand you're a Forbes 30 under 30. So tell us a little bit about how this led to becoming a Forbes 30 under 30. That's a great and amazing accolade. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah. Relationships. I mean, it goes back to relationships again. It was not even something I even thought about. It was just one of those things where, you know, I think just like any great thing, and you kind of mentioned the focus thing. I really like to stay focused on the present and building, and I'll try to not get too big here, but like, you know, building anything that I've done successfully has come from a group of people. And so when you focus on the present and you surround yourself with the right people to that you're able to determine, and you're able to find and see those people when you are in the present, and you get those people around you, and you let this kind of almost like germinates from, like, when you have great people together, things naturally just like manifest. And I think that was one of these perfect examples. Not only is our company like that, but with Forbes, it was focusing on giving a really great presentation at a business model competition, and being super thankful and grateful for the people that one, introduced me to that competition, vouched for me in that competition, were there to support me at that competition. And, you know, and this isn't like my family or like professors, long time. I mean, I was in Texas. I was in Dallas, Fort Worth at this presentation. I had built a relationship with folks from Rice Business Model, or Rice Business School, and the business model competition that we had been entered into through the JPEC, John Papa John Entrepreneurial Center at Iowa. They introduced us to the Rice Business Model competition. We did well there, and I built relationships there at Rice by just being genuine. Like, I ran into people, they invited me over for lunch or dinner, you know, like I had like almost like it felt like a family at Rice with these individuals that were just wanting to help, like believed in our cause, like believed in me, and just wanted to help in any way possible. And this same person introduced me to this like Texas Christian TCU Values Ventures competition, of which I went to, and we got first place. We won the whole thing. And that presentation, like I was just, Forbes 30 under 30 came from me laser focused on our mission, laser focused on trying to clearly communicate why this was such an important problem to the people there at TCU, and being really authentic about that message and really believing it. And the people there, that same people that kind of helped me at Rice, had connections at Forbes, and said, hey, you should check these people out. And there was kind of like a due diligence process, and we made it. So it was just one of those things where like I didn't apply, I wasn't like searching for it or seeking it out. It was just one of those things that like happened because I invested in relationships for people that wanted to see us be successful.
Yeah, and those relationships are so important for entrepreneurs in life in general.
Yeah.
And you know, it always amazes me that there's a common thread with a lot of entrepreneurs who are very successful, is that they really understand how to nurture and foster those relationships. And so tell me, is that where you met your co-founder, Eric? Eric Paul was, I know he's an MD resident in that, and he was also a Forbes 30 under 30.
Yeah. Well, he's a PhD.
PhD. Okay.
Yeah, but
doesn't take away. Yeah. Still very, very well-educated individual.
Yes. But yeah, I was just, at the time Eric and I met, I was presenting this idea about tissue, but still some things related to the nerve graft that I received, and talking about nerve transplants and diagnosis of brachial plexus injuries. And he actually came to me and said, hey, do you sounds like a cool project. Do you have any technical background? I said, no. He's like, well, I do, and this sounds interesting. And that was kind of how we started working together. And then we got kind of turned on to this organ transplant problem. And for a long time, Eric and I just kept meeting with surgeons and coordinators and anybody that we could get a hold of that were doing this work to talk about that waste, talk about why they thought it occurred. And we kept kind of coming back to this, like everybody kept coming back to communication. And so that's when we started thinking about, well, how do we solve communication? And that was kind of the genesis.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what is that problem that you uncovered. And you mentioned earlier, 54% of organs are not used. I mean, that sounds like a ridiculously high number.
Yeah. So I guess the problem that we uncovered were twofold. The high level problem was that, there were inefficiencies in the process that resulted in organ waste. So we realized that there is a ton of people that are involved with making a transplant successful that are different organizations. So you've got the transplant hospital, the donor hospital, the organ procurement organization, and then multiple teams and departments within those institutions, plus the patient themselves, plus the donor family, and then the logistics companies and vendors that help move organs from point A to point B. You've got the laboratories that are doing serologies and blood testing that are involved with this process. So it's very, and then, you throw in tissue, eye banks, blood banks. I mean, there's a ton of people involved in the successful donation and utilization of the organs and tissues that donor selflessly donated. What we realized was that there were systems in place that helped communicate the clinical information, but all the contextual communication and coordination was happening haphazardly through iMessage, phone calls. There was no network for how to talk to somebody about an offer. It'd be like if every company in America, maybe they gave you an email that, hey, your order is confirmed, but if you had any questions, there was no FAQ, there was no chat bubbles. It was just like they gave you a phone number and you just called them. and you got some, employee on the other side that was, so it was just like, there was no kind of system or service set up for that back and forth communication and collaboration that was on a consistent network. So all these people were happening in communications were happening in silos, and they were using the easiest means to communicate possible, which happened to be iMessage. And so we really started first at the company just creating a secure HIPAA compliant chat tool, with the idea that we would be the dedicated platform or network for communication for this industry. Yeah. So that anytime that there was an organ offer, or there had been a donor or a tissue, that the people that needed to communicate with each other to coordinate around this process could do so in a secure environment. And that went really well. But then we also realized that kind of the first fold problem is no consistent standardized way to communicate or collaborate and share information around the donation and transplantation process, which is problematic in the sense that it's so complex that without that standardization, there's a ton of lost time, a ton of miscommunication that results in preventable mistakes and delays and ultimately organ waste. The second fold problem is that the burden of communication being haphazard and doing text and phone calls and emails it's incredibly inefficient. And when you think about a coordinator, frontline staff, when you think about what they're responsible for doing, they're responsible for taking care of the donor. I could spend an hour talking about all the things a coordinator has to do during a transplant case. One of those is actually communicating and keeping everybody on the same page. And so we realized that frontline staff were shouldering the burden of a fragmented communication system by having to do a lot of manual communication and redundant communication themselves. And when we surveyed frontline staff, around it's not exactly, but it's about a third spent, kind of broken into three parts. A third is, well, 1/3 is spent doing actual clinical tasks, their job, what they are trained to do. 1/3 is spent documenting what they did in the records of like the source record, donor record, or a patient record. And then another third doing communication tasks, letting people know who they just communicated with, what's happened, what needs to happen next. And our thought process was, not only is this super fragmented, we could save a lot of time and reduce mistakes by getting everybody on the same network, but we are also drastically improving the frontline staff's experience by making them more productive in the way that we communicate. So we realized that this chat platform was great, but the only benefit was that it's documented, secure, and I mean, there was a huge benefit of that. It's the standardized network for everybody to communicate on. So standardization is really the big key, but it was still taking the frontline staff a ton of time to create a message, equally as amount of time as it would take for them to use iMessage. So we weren't really adding any benefits to frontline staff, iMessage versus our tool. I mean, there was the documentation, security, and the standardization, all those things are great, but from a frontline staff's perspective, it's just as easy and fast to send a text message. So we've said, how do we improve and speed up the time for frontline staff? And that was when we came up with our new kind of this donor tracker model, right? The easy, simple analogy is we've got a network where everybody can collaborate, communicate. It's almost like a LinkedIn for this industry, where people can search, connect, and message each other and communicate around cases that's synced up with their workflows of the case, so they can share organ information and patient information, but it's like a collaboration network. And then on top of that, we realized that there's sometimes a need for two-way communication, which is, what's happening in our message, but sometimes it's just good for a nurse to be able to just simply update multiple people with a single click of a button, instead of creating 10 message rooms for 10 different surgeons to update them all on the same thing, where they were just copying, pasting messages over and over again. That doesn't make any sense. And so just like Domino's pizza tracker, there's not a person that's, cooking the pizza and then sends you a text message that says, okay, I just got it out of the oven. And then, okay, I just put it in the box. Okay, now I gave it to the Uber driver. And then the Uber driver is also not sitting there texting and saying, okay, hey, I'm on my way. Oh, hey, by the way, I'm about 10 minutes away. No, what's happening is there's an automated system of alerts and checkpoints that are sending those notifications out to you. And there's no need for you to interject a lot of times, maybe sometimes when they finally get there and there's a need for back and forth communication. But for the most part, it's hands-free. You put in your communication preferences or kind of your drop-off preferences. Okay, leave it at my door, whatever, front desk, or, whatever. But you just follow along. And that's what we're doing too. So we have this kind of component where it's like, you don't need to be communicating back and forth or bugging a coordinator to send 10 messages to 10 different people every single time something happens. Our coordinators on our platform, or frontline staff on our platform, click one button. And in some cases, depending on GPS location and other kind of auto triggers are either manually sent or automatically sent to dozens of people at the same time in an efficient way that saves our frontline staff a ton of time, which ultimately that time goes back to doing their clinical work even better, which ultimately provides a better experience for frontline overburdened, overworked frontline staff, and allows them to be more productive and ultimately save more lives.
Yeah. And it always amazes me because you started with one problem to solve, which was just the intercommunication between these frontline workers just to get organs from one place to another. But then you started to uncover that there were bigger systemic problems in the hospital system. And so, that whole thing ultimately will save more lives. And, have you, tell me a little bit about the metrics here in terms of how many lives do you think have been saved because of OmniLife's new technology? And I'm just going to plug my computer in here because before my Zoom starts to die here.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, so that's better. So yes, yeah. So please. So how many lives do you think have been saved?
That's a good question. So far, we've got 20 institutions on the platform that are using it in some way, shape, or form. There's definitely more of those institutions that are using it more or have been using it longer. Some of our longest customers have been doing donors in the tool for 3 years. And so, those sites, if I'm just thinking top of my head, and these are metrics that we definitely, there's somebody on my team that knows these answers. I should probably know them, but it is a metric that we track. I would guesstimate short answer is well over 1,000. Wow. If you think about the average, it's like, oh yeah, I mean, if you think about the average size of one of our customers that have been using it long term, let's say 70, 100 donors a year. They've been using it for 3 years at 300 donors for each one. That's one account. So yeah, I'd say we're probably pushing over 1,000.
That's incredible. So
donors facilitated, and that's not organs. That's just donors, right? So each donor has 8 organs, which could save the lives of 8 patients plus tissue. I mean, I think there's upwards to 40 to 50 people that could benefit from a single donor. So if you're talking about 1,000 donors, you're talking about a 10-fold number of patients that have been some way, shape impacted by that.
Yeah. So, it's always a hard subject to talk about organ donation. I mean, I'm an organ donor, and they always ask me when I renew my license at the DMV. And how did you become accustomed to talking about this with people? I know you had a personal experience there, but how do you get the stakeholders in the room to the table at the hospital to say, hey, this is really important, and this is how it can benefit you, the hospital, these people's lives, and your frontline workers?
I mean, most of the people that we're selling to and working with, they are full. I mean, they're fully in on this kind of donation concept and honoring every gift possible, every donor, every time, every organ, every time, and so they're already doing that hard work and are super passionate. Our mission is not necessarily to save patients' lives directly, but to help providers save more lives. We're very provider centric in that regard, helping what we consider to be heroes, giving them tools to make their job even easier and better and more impactful and more scalable. So I think in that regard, a lot of the people that we're speaking to are already really bought into that mission. We're just enabling them to do it even better, even faster. I think in terms of stakeholders like general investors, people that have invested in the business, we're backed by several large angel groups that are sophisticated investors that went through a very long due diligence process and ended up making an investment, there was an education process there about the donation process and about where we sit in this process. And I think it's just, important for all listeners too that are less familiar with this process, what we're doing. It's like we're not determining who gets what organ. We're not determining, we're not, I guess, directly associated with that matching process, or that who gets it. We don't determine who gets the organ, right? The United States government has an algorithm that they maintain that is that is updated continually based on certain policies that are in place, and they review those policies and kind of try to continue to update them to maximize their influence and potential. And we are just kind of the communication layer that sits on top of that system. And certainly we help exchange information that may accelerate decisions or help or support decisions, but we're not the ones that are actually kind of brokering or policing that kind of exchange system. And so we're several steps away from kind of some of those more ethical questions, I think. And then in terms of just like donor awareness, I think if I feel like people that see it from an outside perspective, if you're there and you've seen one, you get it, right? And I think that when I first saw my first case, it was in Minnesota, Minneapolis. We saw a case. It was a horrible, tragedy of a young donor, and but it's not like this kind of like, okay, process them, take them, and so like when very much different than a lot of surgeries, there's a moment of silence for that donor in the OR room. Everybody's flying around. You've got surgeons coming in from New York and from Florida and from Pennsylvania and from Michigan or whatever, flying into one central location where this donor is located, wherever the donor may be. You've got surgeons and teams that have never worked with each other flying into an OR that has a tight time schedule. I mean, they have to sometimes, if you talk about hearts, they have to get that heart out of the body and back into a transplant patient in 4 hours. So if there's an hour flight, there and back, that's 2 hours. You've got 2 hours to do the recovery and the transplant. So you're talking minutes matter in this industry, seconds matter in this industry. And so everybody's flying around. It's this crazy orchestration. It's chaotic. And then everything stops. The lights turn down. They bow their heads. There's usually some kind of eulogy or some kind of note that the family writes that one of the coordinators reads on behalf of the donor. Everybody takes a moment of silence to honor the donor. There's also honor walks where donors, when they're taking to the OR, hospital staff, organ procurement staff will line up on the sides of the wall to honor that donor and their gift that they're making, because and the patients that they'll ultimately solve. So there's a huge honor and respect component to donation that I think oftentimes people don't even realize that they're doing it. These surgeons, I've seen surgeons in the room very emotional about this donation, about donations. And then when you actually see the procurement, and in this particular case, it was they were removing a liver, and the surgeon removes the liver and is going to take it to do back table work, is what they call it, where they package it and make sure that it can, it's all the vessels are tied and it's going to be ready to go into a patient. And he takes the liver, and they always talk about the gift of life. And I kind of conceptually understood what they meant by that, but I physically understood it and emotionally understood it when he picked the liver out, and as he was walking it to the table, he was holding it like a baby. And to me, that was just like, boom, like that was just like a newborn. That was a new life that was coming out of that donor and being passed on to somebody. And that gave me chills. And ever since, I was like, at that moment, I was like, this is stuff I want to do for the rest of my life.
I'm getting chills myself with that.
Yeah. That's when I really kind of, it clicked for me that this really is a matter of life and death. And like I said, there's a huge amount of honor and respect for the donors. And I think when people learn that, and when I share those stories, people people have a different view on it
You know,
than maybe they had before.
it sounds so sacred and, as you said, honoring and solemn of a moment with those with that OR room. And when you hear about this and then when you witness those experiences, how does it feel that you played a role in that? As small of a role as you might think, I think it's a huge role. But how does it feel for you to know that you're playing a big part of that?
It's pretty incredible. Like I said, I I'm just fascinated and have so much respect for the people in this industry that are making it happen when it's so complicated, and they've been making it happen before they even had cell phones, and it's incredible. I mean, it's just and honestly, the only reason an organ gets transplanted in the United States today successfully is because how much those people care, because they certainly don't always have the tools to make that easier for them. And like our industry is really accelerating right now technologically, which is good. I think healthcare in general, as COVID was kind of a big part of that digital transformation in a lot of different areas, and we've seen that impact our industry as well. So it's getting better, and we're certainly a huge component of that. We are certainly riding that tailwind and riding that wave, and really trying to push our product to help these people make their lives easier so they can save more lives. So I think that there's a tremendous amount of respect I have for the people doing it in the industry, and yeah.
We haven't even touched on that yet, and you just mentioned with the pandemic that's going on right now, and just the logistics problem, even with vaccines. Do you see that this is an application that could be used for even the logistics of some of these things? It's I keep reading more and more people are obviously getting it, but it's been a slow drip to get these vaccines out there.
Hey, we are, at the end of the day, we are a communication platform that wraps a layer of automation and communication around any workflow. And with the right partner, we can move into really any area within healthcare. And I say the right partner because, we're not in the business of, building out, yet each of these specific components of the process, right? Like, we're not building, organ pumps and then building GPS units that go on that pump, and then building out a GPS location system, guidance tracking system that goes on top. Like, we're kind of this layer of collaboration, communication, information sharing, and we plug in those different solutions on our platform along the way. And so let's say that there was a partner that came to us that said, hey, we're one of the main logistics providers or vendors contracted by the United States government for distribution of the COVID vaccine. We need a better communication process around our tool to better communicate and coordinate with all the different logistics people helping this, and whatever those stakeholders, critical stakeholders are. Our company is, I think, at the end of the day, is a communication and collaboration tool around critical assets, whether that critical asset be an organ or a patient or a donor or a vaccine. I think we have the potential to grow into all those areas.
Yeah. So how do we make this bigger, and how do we make the issue of organ donation come to the forefront in the top minds of people? And but how does the world know? How can we get the world to know about OmniLife?
Well, first, I mean, you can share this video, right? Or, comment on it or whatever. I think, like I've said this in the past, but, we're a benefit corporation focused on a social impact. Our mission is social impact focused. Everything we do at OmniLife is focused on the execution of our mission before all other things as a benefit corp. I think in order to affect change at a scale large enough to think about kind of the entire United States and even the globe and the world, I think it takes a lot of awareness of this problem, a lot of passionate people, a lot of smart people spending time figuring out and working together how to solve it. And that's why I think WonderFund is such a great partner for this particular initiative, and why crowdfunding is so powerful for a benefit corp like ourselves, is lowering the barrier for anybody with $1,000 to be able to be formally part of our business. And, I think that's just something that I think is really powerful, because in my mind, having an ability to, the crowdfunding campaign in and of itself is a great way to share awareness about what we're doing, but then to create a community of advocates that we can all win together and do, I like what I like to say, do good while doing well. I think that to me is super powerful, and is how you create a great, enduring, long-lasting company. How you start kind of a revolutionary idea that disrupts the entire industry. It takes a tribe. It takes a group of people to make that happen. And I think what better way to get a group of people engaged than to utilize the kind of these crowdfunding mechanisms that are made available. That's one big way. The other big way, I think, is just to ask questions and be curious about the process, and seek to understand. There's a lot of information out there. I think our news, our press, maybe some of you have seen the featured articles in Washington Post, New York Times, et cetera, about, mainstream media talking about donation, talking about transplantation, talking about some of the challenges. And I think it's getting national focus and attention right now. There's a lot of tailwinds. I mean, there's been several legislative changes that have affected the entire United States that were made by, several legislators, in Washington, that said, hey, we could be better. And it set out this kind of cascade of kind of people thinking and paying attention to the problems. And we don't have all the answers yet. Maybe the answers or the things that they're changing aren't perfect, but it's progress. And I think donation and transplants getting a national attention right now from some of our, from some of the biggest and most influential people in our government to some of the biggest mainstream media companies. And I think we just continue to ask the question, how can we be better? And educate yourself on this process and have conversations about it. Yes, I mean, and everybody should be seeking to understand, right? Because when you check yes or no on your license, you should know what that means. And so I think there's a bit of taking that decision seriously and educating yourself about it. And obviously, OmniLife is one of those organizations that's really trying to grow awareness and educate people, through conversations like this.
Yeah, well, this has been heart and mind opening for me, and just very much a beautiful discussion of beyond just business but purpose. And so, what do you think are your key milestones here in the next few years as you're building up OmniLife?
Yeah, we right now we have a national focus to grow our platform nationally. We've got several regions in the United States that we've strategically targeted for lots of different reasons. We've made a couple of really strategic and exciting partnerships that some we've announced already, some will be being announced here very soon. We're really focused on growth, and that's part of what our current fundraising opportunities are about, are funding some of these pilot sites. We're going to give our tool for free in terms of a free pilot at several of these strategic locations across the country. And this fundraise will help us fund those locations during that trial period to see if we can't make a national impact and make a really big splash here in the next several months.
Okay, great. So can you tell us, how can everyday people here get involved in your mission with OmniLife, and where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a Facebook page for those on Facebook can click to and find. I'm sure we'll be posting links to our Facebook pages after this or related to this conversation and other platforms. On our Facebook pages, there's actually several groups. One of those groups is more information on how you can participate if you're interested as an investor. Others, you can just choose to follow us and join our newsletters. I think also on our website and we'll be posting. We're active on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc.
Okay.
So yeah, just any platform, search OmniLife or get OmniLife, or go to getomnilife.com and you can find all that information.
Any last minute thoughts, Dalton?
Yeah. I feel like some of the coolest things I've done and the most memorable things I've done in life have been doing things that make me feel bigger than myself. And I think that's what's so attractive about OmniLife for our employees, for our partners, for our customers, is we really deep in our core values and kind of the character of OmniLife is this idea of of serving and sacrificing for something bigger than yourself. And I would just say that for those looking to participate or looking to find something that gives them purpose and a feeling of doing something bigger than themselves, I would love to have those types of people with that type of energy join our mission and help us make this a reality.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have. Dalton, thank you very much for taking the time to share about OmniLife, your vision, your mission, and the personal purpose that you have behind the company. On behalf of Wonder Fund, I just want to thank you and your team. We're looking forward to seeing you guys be successful. It's already off to a great start. A lot of attention has been in this space already, and we're looking forward to seeing where this can go in the future. So thank you so much. And you can see Dalton's OmniLife page at Wonderfund. It's wonderfund.co/OmniLife, wonderfund.co/OmniLife, where you can invest as little as $1,000. So great to talk to you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Marvin. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely.